Hey friends, Rational Bassist here. Something a little different this week. I'm going to tell you the story of the 15-year file. Well, we haven't reached 15 years, but that file, including how I got my start on TLD, the 5-year challenge, 10-year challenge, some Twitch experiences, and then I'm going to offer a pointed but hopefully humane response to bad faith criticism that I've received from folks on Twitch. If you're wondering if I'm going to call anyone out specifically, the answer is no. Nor is the point to call anyone out, much less demean, humiliate, or attack them. Furthermore, while my opinion of TLD Twitch is largely a negative one overall, this isn't a rebuke of every last person to ever stream TLD on Twitch. And it's definitely not a critique of people who are or aspire to play TLD or something else on Twitch as a career. In fact, when I speak of TLD Twitch, I'm reflecting on bad actors and their influence on a small community, because it tends to be considerable, especially when you lack accountability in the way that Twitch does. I do point to the financial and existential validating interests involved as reasons for maligning other players because I'm sympathetic to those reasons. Though I don't really talk about it, I'm sympathetic to a host of reasons, right down to straight neuroses, but not the resulting conduct. To be clear, this is the end of something, not the beginning of something. I'm offering a response, and that's going to be it. It's a one-off video. I require neither reassurance nor any bolstering at all. Agree? Disagree? Whether you like TLD Twitch or dislike it is not under indictment here. In a sense, I'm giving myself the opportunity to turn the page. Thanks in advance for giving me that opportunity. Let's begin with a little history. The week of September 15, 2013, new Canadian game developer Hinterland launched a Kickstarter campaign for The Long Dark, which they touted as a post-disaster survival experience. Actually, that's a little too much history. Let's move it forward a few years. Let me try it like this. TLD Early Access ran from September 22, 2014 to June 6, 2017, with Faithful Cartographer formally being the last survival update. Even though August 1st, 2017's full release Wintermute patch was arguably its own build, most within the community still refer to the survival counterpart as Faithful Cartographer until Rugged Sentinel, aka the Moose patch, was released at the end of 2017. I got my start during Vigilant Trespass, aka the Interloper patch, mid-late 2016, but it was Resolute Outfitter where I really dug in. Resolute Outfitter, which you can see here, was the penultimate early access survival update and went from December 15, 2016 to June 5, 2017. That file at the top is my very first Interloper file ever. Note the date of June 1st, 2017, and also the 200 days. Most of my survival achievements were acquired during the Resolute Outfitter patch. At least the ones that were actually available in early access. However, the will to live was actually one with nature back during early access, 200 days instead of the 500. And that's why 200 days in my first Interloper. The June 1st date is important because on June 6th, 7th, 2017, Hinterland wiped our early access survival saves. This is just the last notice they gave us, the 24-hour warning. It wasn't the only notice. I don't recall how much notice they ultimately gave us, but I didn't feel blindsided by it. That's all I remember now, is that it was adequate notice. Also, it's early access and full release had been announced, so we all saw it coming. By the way, I say that the saves were wiped. Sure thought they were, but if you still have your Hinterland folder from way back during the conversion to full release, you may find that your old early access files are still in there, because this right here isn't a recording from back in 2016, 2017. It's a recording from 2 months ago when I played Resolute Outfitter for the first time in a couple years and discovered that my saves were still there, which was a really nice discovery. But I digress. On the heels of the save wipe came the Faithful Cartographer patch, aka the Mapping and Bunny Bashing patch. That day, June 7, 2017, also the birthday of what we now call the 13-year file. At the time, the expert interloper guidance was you should never pass time, especially at the beginning. This post from Mucky or Mecky from late 2016 reflects that wisdom. I have this fondness for taking things to their extreme limits, you may have noticed. So while not wholly subscribing to that wisdom, I decided to run with it and dedicate my entire next interloper file to never passing time at any time under any circumstances. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Not passing any time while an honorable pursuit comes with its own challenges in the way of absolute tedium. Passing time has a number of practical applications, like passing those couple of hours before dawn when you wake up fully rested. Well, under any circumstances means under any circumstances. So on many occasion, I'd have to lamp up if I had a lamp, sprint until tired, rack out for an hour in hope of reaching dawn's light, and usually having to repeat the process. Some of my oldest followers will remember this vividly because it happened multiple times a session. I can't even begin to know what latent trauma it caused. But the challenge is the challenge. Thankfully, we had water parties. This is the old school water system. You could melt snow. By the by, the hardest thing for me to figure out as a new player was how to find the snow, to melt the snow, to boil the water. But we were able to do it all in this little menu, and the time would melt away. Many a water parties were had. We achieved 500 and then 1,000 days in this fashion, without a minute of time passed. On June 14, 2018, Hinterland released Vigilant Flame. This was also my last day of streaming for about 7 months. But in January 2019, I returned. I returned to the no passing time file in pursuit of 5 years survived, but Vigilant Flame had changed the cooking system to a manual one. And what happens when you click on it? You have to pass time until the water is ready and boiled. It also took longer, so we had to get creative about how we whiled away that time, unless you like water boiling. And again, I apologize to the folks who endured that. But no passing time means no passing time. Since I couldn't rely on water parties, I fished, and I fished a lot. Right here, literal ton of fish, all in the first 5 years. And then we reached 5 years survived in a single interloper file without passing a minute of time. Leading in Jet, a channel regular and Miles' number 2 fan, tweeted out this shout-out tweet, which was really touching, also retweeted by Mark Meir. The 5-year challenge had been fraught with a lot of streamer negativity, hyping, swiping, some really toxic competition, and a whole backstory that we really don't need to get into, except that it inspired the 10-year run. The 10-year run was intended as a Valentine to a community that I loved very much, but could no longer remain in. How best to pay tribute to them? Well, we had just spent 5 years on a binge. How about a purge? Let's pass all the time. But also, to add to the challenge, we'll have to stay well fed the entire time. The 10-year challenge began in mid-August 2019. By my estimation, we were going to see an episode 3 patch or some survival update that would break the game for a period of time within the next 2-3 months. That proved to be true. It meant we only had 2 to 3 months to get 5 years, so we were going to move for effect. While I had correctly predicted an imminent episode 3 release, I failed to beat it to the 10-year mark. On September 30th, 2019, episode 3 was announced for an October 22nd, 2019 release. The next week, I had a leak in my house that caused immense damage and occupied a lot of my time. When episode 3 was released on October 22nd, I set the 10-year challenge aside to do a special EP3 video for my channel viewers on Twitch. Then I returned to the 10-year file. The episode 3 patch had broken the game significantly. Wolves no longer acted right. We later learned that this was due to a shift in Raphael's vision, and the old system we'd used for 3 years were retroactively deemed an exploit. But the wolves were also phasing through closed doors, and the scripts through which they engaged us and other wildlife were clearly broken. Also, there was this. Then 4 Days of Night was released on October 28th. Between the broken game and 4 Days of Night, I announced the 10-year finale on Saturday, November 9th. Then a regular viewer, Brickenstone, told me he would be out of town on the 9th, so I moved it up to the 2nd. I had to take the game offline so that I could finish 4 Days of Night later, meaning I would also miss Hinterland's Wolf Fix on October 29th. Leading up to the 10-year finale, I spent a straight 48 hours playing the game, preparing for the finale. No sleep, no rest. I was exhausted. So how do you run out a finale in an unpatched and also independent of that patch, broken game a week early on 48 hours without sleep in a perm death file? I was not willing to assume the consequences of losing the file due to the many outstanding bugs. So what I decided to do was create an alternate universe. What I did was reach 10 years legit. We made it to my favorite cave in my favorite subregion. Then I backed up the save and said, if we ever come back to this challenge, we will use that file. You'd be forgiven if you found that finale concept a little mind-bending, especially on Twitch. I'm right there with you, but I challenge you to do better at the last minute on 48 hours without sleep. So over the next hour and a half, we reached 10 years legit, and then we ran around exploring all of the ways that the game was broken using this alternate copy of a highly valued file. It was surreal and scary, and also a lot of fun, a great way to exhale, unorthodox to be sure. After that, for the first time, I posted my run to Reddit. You may have seen it, and that was it. If you're hearing this story for the first time, then I hope you appreciate this endeavor with new eyes. But to be sure, the 10-year challenge was intended as a Valentine to a community that had changed beyond the point of being able to love me back. I talked about this a little bit in the 11-year challenge, and this is the 11-year part 1. Sorry about the aspect ratio. It would improve. I'd correct that later. But I talked about my last days on Twitch. There have been some lazy and spiteful mischaracterizations of my method as just passing time. As if anyone could survive any length of time, much less a number of years, without acquiring resources. After I finished the 10-year run, I walked away from TLD Twitch and streamed other games. During the pandemic, I decided to return because it would be something familiar and comfortable to me and a number of old friends. It seemed like a nice thing to do. Many folks hadn't heard of me or the 10-year run, so they were surprised to hear that this had happened at all. Fair enough. However, others, including streamers who had been present for the finale, tried to claim that I had made it all up. It had never happened. Other folks treated it like an obstacle they had to overcome. It couldn't just be some extreme thing that a weird guy did for kicks. They had to have an opinion on whether it was possible, whether they could do it, and so on. Twitch does strange things to a person. Take an avid gamer and a person who would like to do this full time and or is putting a lot of pressure on their Twitch channel to make all their dreams come true. Add the anxiety of other people playing the same game in a small community and the constant fear that their glory may overshadow yours, that they may get the subs or viewers you need to do this full time or dethrone you as the all-knowing TLD pro, and all bets are off. I try to explain this in terms of Twitch's validating effects and in terms of existential and financial need because it humanizes people in a way that, well, some people are just jerks, simply wouldn't. Kurt Vonnegut used to say that bad chemicals and bad ideas are the yin and yang of madness. Well, unfulfilled need and experience are the yin and yang of malicious behavior. But all that said, I'm not claiming that my hands are clean. Having to defend your honor and integrity can lead you down a tricky road. And no shortage of that is ultimately my fault. If you leave because of behavior and come back to find that same behavior in play, what was your expectation and why were you surprised? For the next couple of months, I moved on to other games. Scrap Mechanic, a really fun game with a great community, and some retro. I got to see Twitch with more objective eyes, and I understood the ways in which Twitch had a tendency of mistreating the people who ultimately mistreated each other. So I ultimately left Twitch, and here we are. It's been almost a year, and in that time, I've survived 11, 12, and 13 years. In leaving TLD Twitch behind, I had also hoped to leave the normative behaviors behind, some more of which we're going to discuss in a second here. Unfortunately, some of the bad faith jabs, accusations have persisted. So I want to take an opportunity to confront that one in as humane but pointed a fashion as I can. It is also important that you know that when I speak of TLD Twitch as a community, I'm not literally saying the entire community is at fault or is adopting these behaviors. In a small community, just one or two ambitious and unscrupulous voices can change an entire community ethic. Also, please don't leave a comment inquiring who I'm speaking of or guessing. You risk maligning someone who has done nothing wrong. Furthermore, the people who spout these lies or bad faith accusations or mischaracterizations, they've never once brought them to me directly. This is how TLD Twitch PvP has worked in my experience. That's PvP, player versus player. It's what passes for competition in the TLD Twitch streaming community. While I leave room for the possibility that this is just Twitch overall, most other communities I've joined channel their competitive natures into the game, common to the community. Beating a time, out-surviving someone, whatever. TLD Twitch streamers can also compete in that fashion. But have you ever noticed how much most TLD streamers avoid any direct competition? I used to have an ongoing Hunted Part 2 competition with Twitch streamer Disaster Lesbian Gamer, who may not stream anymore. Oh, and she won that, by the way. I do a run, she do a run. We share our observations and experiences. It was during this run that DLG taught me that putting away your rifle helps you run faster. We keep going and repeat. It was a lot of fun, but it doesn't happen anymore. Instead, from my experience, it goes a little something like this. An anxious, ambitious, or endlessly competitive upcoming TLD Twitch streamer has anxiety about what someone else is doing and the trajectory of their own channel. Will they get partner or otherwise expand their influence, reach, income? Will or has someone else gotten it first? What about their dreams? Don't they deserve it more? What's that other streamer doing that's so great? So on and so forth. They snipe another streamer with low-key accusations, passive-aggressive jabs, or in one weird case in the past, outright swiping things that other streamers teach them, duplicating them, taking credit for them, and then posting across social media platforms and other streams. They aren't mutually exclusive, by the way. The folks who engage in this behavior, they'll downplay your efforts and accomplishments, call you the scum of the earth. But they are more than happy to watch your videos, learn from you, and incorporate what they learn into their streams. Don't count on getting credit, though. How do I know that this is the thought process? Well, I was on TLD Twitch for over 2 years. I'm also uncomfortably direct when faced with a conflict. Also, it's a small community and someone's always listening. So on the admittedly handful of occasions where someone would lob an accusation my way, something more than things get away from you while focusing on the game and the stream, which they definitely do, I'd hit them up in the DMs. Or if I was lurking in their channel, I'd push back, direct like. If I confronted them in their DMs, without exception, I'd first receive a flat denial. I must be thinking of someone else, to which I'd offer a clip. Because if you're going to accuse someone, you need to have evidence. Then I'd hear an explanation that goes to how badly they needed to either blow up on Twitch or be perceived as a pro in the TLD community. Fine, but why accuse me? And if I pushed back in their chat, the go-to accusation would be to accuse me of causing drama. See, we're a nice community who helps and supports each other. Why can't you understand that rational basis? This is an instance of wanting it both ways, holding me to conduct you yourself aren't even modeling. Like I said, experience and unmet needs are the yin and yang of malicious behavior. By the way, when confronted, in no instance have I ever had anyone try to defend the comments. So, Twitch PvP is streamers taking indirect jabs at each other for reasons. Not insignificant reasons, but in no way do they defend the conduct. The other one, however, is treating a conflict like good content, and sometimes they cultivate it. So I'm in a bind here. I want to address the bad faith in a way I never could on Twitch. I want to have an official response log to these comments because qui tacet consentere videtur. By remaining silent, I'm said to adopt and accept those characterizations. But I'm not looking to give free exposure or content to the person or people. Let's just say person. It's not many, so person. Making those jabs. There are also a couple of reasons I'll keep close to the vest as to why it's important to address the misstatements but not identify the source or sources. Also, I'm not looking for anyone to go and fight my battles for me in someone else's chat room or something. I'm going to arm you with a response. Maybe we'll be able to leave it at that. Finally, this probably isn't the content you came to my channel looking for today. I'm just going to ask you for the license to cover something that has bothered me for a long time, especially in light of so many claims that the TLD Twitch community is such a great one. With the definition of nice being someone who's pro-strat you're extolling, and they're taking time to share their brilliance with you. The real definition should be, how are they, and indeed any streamer, treating you as a human being, not as a fan or a follower? How are they treating other streamers as human beings worthy of dignity and respect? That's always been my definition of nice. And the great community I was looking for in Twitch that once was and ceased to be a long time ago, well, I honestly do miss it. Believe it or not, once upon a time, a streamer's 500-day finale was a community event. People would literally stop their streams to go and join in on that finale. When was the last time you saw that happen? I've fretted more than a little about addressing this in lieu of some other content today, but I do feel obligated to do it where other material would be easier. Because a great community has accountability, and we talk straight to each other and honestly, not in hushed whispers quietly maligning people or absorbing their attack. If you're wondering why this is so important that I would create a specific video and talk for a half hour, it's because of this. I will not claim to have played a literal 5,000 hours. This game gets alt-tabbed quite a bit. But probably 2,000 to 3,000 hours of that gameplay of my life has been spent on this one file, somehow managing to survive always with integrity. So it's no small thing when someone throws out a jab and keeps repeating it, even if it's out of desperation. I think I've been humane enough. Let's turn to the bad faith claim. The bad faith claim is that I'm just passing time. Let me start by reminding you that the 5 to 10 year pass all the time challenge was directly responsive to 5 years without passing any time under any circumstances. Now let's have a look at just passing time. I created this file for that reason. Can you imagine being the file created just for this reason? If reincarnation exists, I'm going to be reincarnated as a file used by a player to determine if you can levitate after sustaining blood loss, dysentery, and food poisoning. Ooh, better live right. Well, we made it about 3 hours just passing time. I've survived a fair bit longer than that, so I must be doing something other than just passing time. If that strikes you as an absurdly literal interpretation of the phrase just passing time, because that phrase is used to minimize the actual effort involved in surviving, even when passing time. The 11, 12, 13, 15-year challenges, they don't require me to pass time like the 10-year challenge did. I do from time to time, especially after clearing broken railroad or at times when I'm in HRV. But do take notice that there is a survival component to this. We'll get into this a little more in a bit, but this really is just a different way of playing the game. What I do now is mostly goal-oriented circuits. I have 2 that I'm going to show you today. This is 15-year challenge episode 7, the beachcombing episode. In this episode, I introduced you to my circuit for beachcombing cloth for effect. Start in some non-coastal highway region, go to coastal highway, beachcomb and crumbling highway, spend time in crumbling highway to shake all the possible time spent indoors over the last few days. Then beachcomb Desolation Point and spend as much time as possible in the Riken until I acquire cabin fever risk. Then I beachcomb Desolation Point again, beachcomb crumbling highway and coastal highway, and I head back to the ravine to kick back for a few days. Usually that lasts 1 day, and then I go to Mystery Lake to hunt. The Ash Canyon version of that, now that I've explored some of Ash Canyon and the respite rope is deployed, is to enter Ash Canyon from the Echo Ravine side, ascend the rope, sleep and heal into respite as much as necessary, proceed to Miner's Folly, dip into the hut and warm up, hunt the bear, cook the bear, take the food and run to both the nearby caves and gold mine, gather all of the coal, head back to Miner's Folly, heal from my trek in an actual structure where I can sleep 10-12 hours, then heading across the bridge to the cave, dropping some bear meat, and then I go and saw a cedar or fir limb. I go back to the cave to heal, then I repeat. Looks like we got a third limb, which never happens, so I'll nab that one tomorrow. The next day I head into High Meadow and down to the level with Climber's Cave. I take bear meat and I saw another limb or 2, gathering whatever sticks I can in the process. Then I take all of the fuel to Homesteader's Respite and wait for a good free fire opportunity. When I get one, I haul buttocks to the fishing cabin. fish the fuel all away, or as much as I can without risking low fuel overnight with a potential morning blizzard, and I schlep the fish up to the respite. I sleep, heal, and repeat the process from before, except I use fish instead of another bear. I do that for 50 days until the bear respawns, if I'm able to stretch the fish that far. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. A typical cycle takes 13 days from bear to fishing or fishing to fishing. We've been spending a fair bit of time focusing on the past. I'm currently in Ash Canyon and my clothing is in tatters. I don't want to shred the rest of it, so we're going to head home while I bring this discussion on home. I have some beachcombing to do. And while I'm on the subject, I should mention I'm not currently passing those 5 days in DP because I have 500 days survived in Desolation Point and I want to keep it that way for now. I really don't have a good reason, I just do. Let me take a moment to remind you that we're doing challenges that involve surviving X amount of time. The goal is reaching that amount of time with my own personal goal of seeing how I handle losing the file, whenever that ends up happening. That's always been a personal goal, but there is a score and it involves days survived. Meanwhile, except for Ash Canyon, I've been through each region dozens upon dozens of times. Sometimes it's nice to go back through in whole or in part, but rarely is there anything new to see. So the goal can be a pragmatic passage of days, or it can be part of some other pursuit while also fighting to carefully stay alive. I never claim that I don't pass any time, and I've never seen any reason to need to defend passing time, whether back during the 10-year challenge when that was the point, or now to a lesser extent for 3 to 5 days every once in a while, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's tedious to eat and drink in a loop, and then sleep every night in 2-hour bursts to avoid freezing to death. This on top of the stress of playing an old file that is just as permadeath and susceptible to a single mistake as any other file, old or new. The problem is that the claim makes it sound like that's the only thing I ever do, and we have, 45, 50 episodes to prove to the contrary. It's actually much more likely I'll be running one of those 2 circuits than actually just purely passing time, but I do reserve the right to do it. But do you know what those 2 categories and 3 types of passing time have in common? They all result in days survived. They are also all legitimate ways of playing this game. They have their own challenges, methods, strategies, and limitations. The accusation that I'm just passing time is a bad faith claim to assuage someone's Twitch anxiety by undermining someone else's efforts and accomplishments. We've talked about that. The good faith counterpart to that is my approach to surviving in the long dark fails to abide by an expectation of how one should survive in the long dark or how a day is to be survived. My immediate response would be that there is nothing standard about this challenge and the expectations and normal conventions of gameplay should be entirely set aside. Notwithstanding expectations of honesty, using an unmodified game and no reliance on cheats, glitches, or save scumming, all of which have been painstakingly honored in my case. But imagine my having a dialogue with this person, "Oh, you're just passing time," using each of my methods, which they take to task. They'd take my beachcombing circuit and say, well, that 5 days in the Riken is cheesing it because you're just passing those days. And I wonder if it would convince them that I truly do pass those days indoors to let beachcombing RNG that may rely on spending time indoors to replenish new items. And would it persuade them that I put my clothing in containers indoors, which allows their condition decay to slow just a little, which means cloth is spread just a little farther? Would the overarching strategic purpose, other than pure days survive, sway them? Would that be their line in the sand? What about the Ash Canyon circuit? They would probably say, well, all you do is grind, but you don't fight any wolves or predatory wildlife except the occasional bear. You just fish over and over again. Setting aside that now fishing would no longer be seen as an acceptable means to survive in the game, would it change their mind if I said, look, I fight predatory wildlife nonstop in every other region. This is a vacation from that. A different way to play the game. Would that convince them? And what about the pure passing of time in certain regions where I'd seen every last aspect of that region, or had cleared all of the wildlife but still wanted days survived in the region pursuant to the goal? But that every 3 to 5 days I actually went out and checked for wolves, sticks, resources, anything to keep supplies going. Would they then say, passing those 3 to 5 days are illegitimate in my eyes. They do not count. You were just passing time. You should be out looking for sticks and brambles every few hours of every day. There is no excuse to pass time like that. Well, what if I told them that passing time like that was both another way to play the game, but also a means to an end, pursuing the challenge, a grind that I slogged through because I wanted to see the challenge through? Would my conviction change the character of this method in their eyes? Would characterizing it as a sacrifice change anything? Would you believe that I probably wouldn't have to convince them at all? We are talking about accusations that have never been directed to me, because they're cowardly little reflexive jabs meant to protect their brand in the moment, suggesting that something I am doing is easy because they haven't done it and also don't want to do it and shouldn't have to do. But that isn't as easy on the ego as just muttering a bad faith claim under your breath. The best good faith argument that I could come up with, though pointless and poisoned by virtue of the bad faith root of the claim, is that I'm not playing the way they think I should. An expectation that is not paired with any obligation and in no way diminishes the real difficulty and discipline required to continue to see this through. Let me be crystal clear. I've never held myself out to be a pro. I do not care about being called a pro. I'm also privileged to have a career, and I don't need to worry about the financial or existential aspects of this. And it's why I've been afforded the luxury of focusing on growth, community, challenging myself rather than proving something. I've always just sought the dignity and respect that every human being deserves. Speak to me like a human being, treat me with respect, be afforded the same. If there were something to prove, I can't imagine what it would be. What would be left to prove? And to what end? All I've ever wanted to do is have a good time, run my file out, push the limits, and maybe share it with folks who are interested. That's it. My hope is that you'll come to expect that from every streamer, regardless of whether you support them through means other than viewership. But if you do support people who run other folks through the muck, you're reinforcing that tactic and you are the problem. Simple as that. My hope is that you'll expect more going forward, including of me. Final thought, friends. You are not required to see my methods as legitimate, regardless of what those methods are and what we're talking about at any given time. But you can have that opinion without accusing me of something. You can just have that personal opinion limited to a universe of one, like the good old days. You can enjoy or be intrigued by the videos without agreeing with anything that I do, even though everything I do is just, as I said, experimenting with different ways to play a long-term file in an ethical way. Some of my methods are conventional, some pragmatic, all of them very interesting to me. And that's always going to be my focus. Shouldn't it be? That's all I have on this subject. It's been a long time coming, but that's the story. That's my response. That's it. See you all around the bend. Cheers.